Shem Irgun Shir Torah. We'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rav Yaakov Zev Smith Shlita, the do's and don'ts of the Haftora. We would like to have the great shir of the tzchus of sponsoring a shir. Call Irgun Shir Torah at 718-851-8651.
I heard this recently. Someone went to a Shabbos Simcha, and the way he described it, after the Maftir made the brachos, there was a sudden outburst. He never saw such a thing. In other words, in his minyan, in his minhag for years, the Kourah would lain the Haftora from a klaf. And here he came to a shul that obviously had the minhag that many people have, what we call self-service. He makes the brachos, and everybody lains their own, the Haftora. And he was very surprised. He never saw that. So yes, what should he do? Should he lain along? What's he supposed to do? And then he said, I noticed there are two major differences between my minhag and their minhag. In my shul, they use a klaf, number one, and number two, the Kourah lains. Here, there's no klaf, and it's self-service. And he asked, theoretically, if they would offer him Maftir, should he refuse, because it's very different than his minhag. And I was thinking it's unusual, something like this, which is not just Erev Pesach Shechal B'Shabbos once in a few years, but the Haftora is every single week. We do it every Shabbos and Yom Tiv. And as we'll see, there are three distinctly different minhagim. And as we'll see, there are also many different halachas that are negeya to each minhag. So I was thinking it's appropriate to learn the sugya of the Haftora, where it comes from, why we see some people have a klaf and only the Kourah lains, why many shuls, what we call self-service, you lain from a chumash and you lain it by yourself. And then there's the middle minhag where you have a special Tanakh and the Kourah lains, and some do lain along, some don't lain along. So as our derech always is Be'ez Hashem, to try to find one yesod that gives us enough information. The question I think we should pose is, what's the nature of this Haftora? Baruch Hashem, laining is something that it's not foreign to us. We have laining every Shabbos, Monday and Thursday, and Mincha of the Kriyas HaTorah. Then we have laining of the Megillas, Shir Hashirim, Keheles, Rus, Eicha. Many shuls, those Megillas are what we call self-service. Each person lains Shir Hashirim, if they lain it, Keheles, Rus, and Eicha. Okay, Megillah, we all have a Megillah taka, it's written b'klaf, that's because like the pasuk requires. But the other Megillah, you'll see many shuls, each person lains his own. So the question is, do we compare Haftora to other lainings? And therefore, you would have to have it from a klaf, and you can't have self-service. No one on a regular Shabbos say, today I'm doing self-service. I'm going to take a chumash, I'm laying my own. You have to be yotza from a Sefer Torah with a kriya. So do we compare Haftora to the Kriyas HaTorah, and therefore you have no choice. You have to get a klaf and you have to listen, no self-service. Or maybe it's more similar to the Megillos. But the emes is, it's very hard to compare Haftora to Megillos. Because the Megillos, there is no bracha on it, except for the minhag hagra. But Rav Tfutz Yisrael, we don't make a bracha on the Kriyas Shir Hashirim or Keheles. But regarding the Haftora, based on a Masechta Sefer in Perek Yud Gimel, we make actually 5 brachos, 1 lefaneha and 4 la'achreha. So maybe we'll say Adarabah. Of all the Megillas Esther, we use a klaf because you make a bracha on it. So maybe the fact that the Haftora, there's so many brachos, would make it more comparable to Kriyas HaTorah, and therefore you need a bracha. Or maybe you'll say, no, Torah is Torah, Megillas Esther is a pasuk, but Haftora is not as important. But then you have to understand, how do you explain why we make a bracha? So that's our question, what is the nature of the Kriyas Haftora? So there's no doubt about it, the Haftora is very important. It's not just a minhag, quote unquote. Midin HaMishnah, as we find Megillah Chaf Aleph, the Mishnah enumerates various Kriyos, Megillah, Sheni v'Chamishi, Reish Chodesh, Chol Hamoed, Maftir b'Navi, and we find the Kriya of Navi in the Mishnah. As I told you, Masech T'Seif and Perikah Gimel discusses the brachos, and the Gemara Megillah of Gimel Amid Beis says, "A Maftir and benavi yapachas misara." You need a minyan to lay in the Haftorah. Furthermore, says the Gemara Megillah Chaf Aleph, you have one Bal Koira and not two. Why? Zok Rashi, because Trei Koli Lain Mishtamoi. Zok the Rivash in Siman Lamed Vav. Someone asked him if it's a right to have two Bali Kriya for Haftorah, and he said no. You have to have one, and you have to listen to that Bal Koira. And that's the Ramaz Psak in our Siman today. Reish Pei Dalet Hey, Shnayim La Yomer Haftorah, Bepam Achas the Trei Koli Lain Mishtamoi. So we see a similarity between Haftorah and laining. You have to have a minyan. We make brachos. Now we have a beferisha halacha based on Rishonim and the Gemara. One lanes and not two. So it seems that we do compare Haftorah to Kriyas Haftorah. But we could do better. Did you ever wonder why we tackle lain the Haftorah? What's wrong with playing Kriyas Haftorah? So the Rav Udraham in Say the Shachar Shel Shabbos asked this kasha, Lama Maftir and Benaviyim, because in one time in history they were guys that we can't lain, so Yidden couldn't go without laining, so we lain from a Navi. And he points out that's why there's a minimum of 21 psukim in the Haftorah. Kamat always is less. There's not less than 21 psukim. Why? Because it's seven. The Keneged 7 aliyahs, and aliyah needs 3. 7 times 3 is 21. Now, a little more history. If you want to see the teves Yom Tov Megillah Perek Gimel Mishnah Dalid, he says this gezeira took place in the time of Antiochus during the Nes of Chanukah. So that puts us back to the second Beis Hamikdash. And as the Haftorah was instituted in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, and the way he describes it, that they stopped us from laining, and instead we lain the Haftorah. And therefore it comes out, a Merdika Yisoid, that the Haftorah is sort of bimkoim kriyas Haftorah. In fact, the Avudraham explains that's the word Haftorah. From the Loshin, niftarin bog kriyas Haftorah. You were part the laining when you lain the Haftorah. Now, Grada, both the Tesis Yom Tov and the Levush in the beginning of Reish Pei Dalet explain, even though today Baruch Hashem we're allowed to lain, and we do lain, but once Chazal made a takana, they never revoked it. Just like Lamashal, Chazar Sashat is today not necessary because we have Baruch Hashem, we have Bekiyim, but once it's a takana, we keep the takana. Agav, I should mention that based on this, we can understand why, if you notice, both in the Gemara, Megillah Daf Lamed Amud Beis, a few times, in Shulchan Aruch, a few places, and all the Poskim spell the word Haftora. Hey, Fei, Tes, Reish, Hey. People think Haftorah like half of Torah. It's in between. It's not spelled that way. It doesn't mean that. Haftorah is probably the correct pronunciation, but the spelling is Hey, Fei, Tes, Reish, Hey. I wonder why we pronounce it Haftorah. Like the Chassam Soif in his tshuva spells it with a vav, Haftorah. But I say like the Welt says Haftorah, but it's probably more correct to call it Haftorah. But what's also inspiring, maybe there's more, but I know 3 times in history the Goyim tried to take away from us mitzvahs, and we ended up doing more mitzvahs. They want to take away the Kriyas Torah, so now we have Kriyas Torah and the Haftorah. Chanukah, they want to take away mitzvahs now, and we have a Lichtig Yom Tov Eitei Chanukah. They wanted to take away Tkiyas Shaifa, and what do we have now? Tkiyas the Meyushiv and Tkiyas the Muhammad. Almost like we laid yesterday, Kashiyana Waisa, Ken Yirbe, V'chen Yifreit. You want to take away, we'll do more. But be that as it may, this is the main reason for the Haftorah. There are other reasons, but it seems that Haftorah is a bimkoim kriyas Haftorah. And that's why you have to have a minyan, Trei Kol Mishtamoi, and brachos. But we see more than that. The Mechaber says in Kuf Memvav Gimel, also l'sap, it's also to talk when the person is laning the Haftorah, just like kriyas Haftorah. So the fact that the Mechaber seems to compare it to kriyas Haftorah, we can understand it, because in a certain sense it's a bimkoim kriyas Haftorah. But to me, a bigger hispailas, we know how sacred the concept of tirchot tzibur is by Yidden, we don't keep a tzibur waiting. I mean, just to give you a mashal, the Mishnah in Yuma Daf Samach Chesed Beis says that on Yom Kippur, part of laning, they lain al peh. For Gemara, why do you have to lain al peh? Why don't you just mish the Sefer Torah? Zok the Gemara in Yuma Daf Ayin, that would be a violation of tircha de tzibura. To keep a tzibur waiting while you're mishing the Sefer Torah, it's unacceptable. Tircha de tzibur. Now, so oy bazoi, it makes a lot of sense. When should we begin the Haftorah? In other words, when should the Maftir say the brachos and start the kriyas of Haftorah? It makes sense to me. As soon as you finish the Hagbah, as soon as the person sits down, start making the brachos. Why waste time? Yet we all know the Gemara in Sotah of Lametesamad Beis and the Mechaber in Kuf Mem Zayin says we do not start the Haftorah, the brachos, or the laining until the Goyal finishes the Galila. Why? Because if he's going to be doing Galila and you're already laining further, he's going to miss a few words. Arei Pella. We're talking about one yachid, and very often it's a cotton. You give a cotton Galila. He's not going to miss Parsha Zacha, or he's not going to miss the whole Haftorah. He's going to miss a few words. So you say, a few words? I mean, there's probably 21 psukim without those few words. But because of one yachid missing a few words of the Haftorah, the whole tzibur has to wait until we finish the Hag B'Galila, and then you start the brachos. So that shows, and the Ayvitz and the Siddur points this out, this Gemara, this halacha shows how important Haftorah really is. Don't forget, it's patterned after Kriyas HaTorah. I should mention, the Poskim point out that the Baal Maftir makes 7 brachos altogether. 2 brachos on the Maftir, and 5 on the Haftorah. So he ends up with 7 brachos Keneged Shiva Kruyim. Or, if you want to count 5 brachos of the Haftorah, Keneged Chamishi Chumshei Torah. A lot of symbolism. But the point that we have to realize is that Maftir, Haftorah, is not extra credit. Someone told me his minhag, quote unquote, during the Haftorah, either he is Ma'avasedra, or he catches up on the shmuzin that he didn't do during laining. So that sounds to me more like, the word minhag, if you scramble the letters and you respell it, I don't want to say what it spells out, but the word minhag also spells something, very undesirable. But during the Haftorah, you're not allowed to talk, and I'll do anything. We saw the Mechaber says, during lain, Kriyas and during Haftorah, you're not allowed to talk. Okay, some people say, if it's like Kriyas HaTorah, so you understand their conclusion, but that of course is wrong. The Sefer Machriya, one of the Rishayim, is Siman Lamed Aleph. He says it's a chayva by Kriyas HaTorah, and he says it really goes back to a Takanas Ezra. So obviously, there's a lot to the Haftorah that we have to appreciate. Now to return to our Chakira, we see, besides the 5 brachas that we make, and the whole purpose, the whole design of it is patterned after laining. We saw many halachas that treat it like laining. It makes sense that you should use a klaf. I mean, the Mechaber says beferish in Kuf Mem Gimel Dalid. Let's say a tzibur, this could be in a gay in a bungalow colony, they have one Sefer Torah, and they found it's puzzle on Shabbos, and there's no other eitzah. So what do? You can't give aliyas, you can't make brachos. If you have a puzzle Sefer Torah, you can't lain. Some say you could lain without a bracha, and some don't even do that. But the Mechaber says clearly you can't lain from a puzzle Sefer Torah. So now, l'chayra, we could assume, since as we prove Kriyas Haftorah is similar to laning, so how could you make brachos without a klaf? Which certainly would indicate that the minhag of having a klaf is very necessary. And it's a chiddush to me, but I must tell you, this question, this basic question, do you need a klaf for the Haftorah, to my limited knowledge, is not a Gemara and not in the Rishonim. The first one that spoke about it, and I could say made waves, so to speak, is the Lavush at the beginning of Reish Pei Dal. Lavush is a Talmud of the Ramah. So he's talking about, not even from the first Achronim. But Lavush writes a Lashon that indicates the uniqueness of this question. Now listen to this Lashon. Zok tehelig Lavush, Tamati kol yomai. I had a question my whole life. I don't know how long he lived, but a question 50, 60, 70 years. I didn't see one shul. Shenehagen lichtev haftarais kedin k'may shekayson ha-megillah shekarim b'tzibah. I didn't see one shul in all my years that uses a klaf for the Haftorah. In other words, it's not like, I heard of a scandal, a shul in Chveis and Borbach Flappers, they do this outlandish minhag. He didn't see one shul in his lifetime that used a klaf. So, what does he say about that? I think no one's yoytzim. Why? Now it's interesting, he compares it to Megillah, I think I know why. Because Lamaisa, Navi is not Torah. We try to differentiate between Navi and Torah. But maybe he compares it to Megillah's Esther. But at the end of the day, he says these two facts. No one does it, and I think no one's yoytzeh. How does he justify the minhag? Very simple. V'tzarachiyin. That's his last word. So look at the matziv. It was never done in any shul in his lifetime, but I don't think he yoytzeh. Now, but he's so comfortable that it's true that he takes the liberty of saying that no one's being yoytzeh. Even more of a criticism of this minhag, the Magen Avram quotes it briefly, just mentions the Marmokim, but the Shlo's brother in Yesh Noichud, in the end of Oislam Mites, he writes that Tmiyal and Tuva on those killers Kedoshais, that he lains from a Chumash. First of all, he says, we'll soon see what that means. And I'm worried about the brachos, they shouldn't be brachos levatala. Now, the Levush is worried about not being yoytzeh. And the Yeshnoich is saying, it's a bracha levatala. Like I told you, if you decide to make a laining from a Simchas Torah, Sefer Torah, it's a bracha levatala, besides you're not being yoytzeh. And his problem is, you're not yoytzeh, and it's a bracha levatala. And this is certainly why the minhag hagra, which is recorded in the Ma'aseh of Kuf Lamed Vav, Haftora benigen uvetaimim, trop, minavi nichtav begilyon k'sefer Torah, ve'echad kaira v'kulan shaimim. We'll soon see that's pashat l'shitasei. Since we have to have a klav, we all have to listen and not lain along. And then he adds, imatziba kaira b'kol ram imakayra. If we do what we call self-service, nasa birchas hakayra bracha levatala, because you're not even yoytzeh, bracha levatala. So it's pliadik. Now he doesn't say why, but I understand why. The Gra, like the Yesh Noichlin, and like the Levush, are assuming that the Haftorah is no different than regular laining. And regular laining, you have two qualities. Number one, klaf, and number two, each one listens, and no self-service acceptable. And the Chafetz Chaim, in our Simmons, Yivkad and Aleph, strongly recommends this, and he adds a very edler criticism, I should say. He says, yes, and this is in the Sharatzim, he says, some shul say we can't afford it, because the truth is, the klaf is expensive. So he says, so you know what, better don't buy a silver keser Torah and a silver mantle, and buy klaf. He says, you have money for that, use the money more prudently. So Ramosha in Chelik Dalet Siman Samachei of Narachaim also says, I think it's only you must have a klaf, and this explains the minhag of having a klaf. It's basically like Sefer Torah, so therefore you need a Bal Koira and klaf. But the Gedolei Achrayim after Levush are very questioned by Levush's premise. And they have a question based on a Gemara. But let me give a little of a background. The Machaber in Yeridei Reish Pei Gimel records an Issa to be Kaisav Megillah. That doesn't mean Megillah's Esther. But basically, there's a chiyuv to write Sefer Torah the way the Baruch Shalom gave it. Minimally, you have to write the whole brachos, the whole shmois, but you can't make just a little parsha here, a parsha there. You have to write the entire Torah the way it was given. You have to write the entire Shmuel the way it was given. You can't make parshios. The Mechaber's Lashon in Yeridei Reish Pei Gimel Beis ein kaisen Megillah letinik l'slamed by. You can't make just a small parsha to give it, of course, with a klaf, and give it to a child to learn. If you want to know a contemporary question about this, I saw Rav Sternbach and Chelik Dalet Siman Yud Ches wonders what the justification of the minhag that you see today is much more popular, that every shul come out, they write the Pita Maktaris on a klaf, and they put it on the wall. He says, a very nice skula, but what's the heta? Ein kaisven megillois. So probably you're thinking of a school of Frekmanish Kenkashis, and some people say school is a Pekuach Nefesh, but he wonders, what's the heta? So he says it's a different Teir, we'll soon see Eis Lasis Lashem, and there's a reason for it, but at the end of the day, you can't write just Megillois. Oh. Freg di Gemara, listen to this. This is Gemara in Gittin Daf Samach. Hi Sifra Seif Haftarah. Also Lemikabei B'Shabbos. Now, what's a Seif Haftarah? So you have to realize in those days they were quite poor, and they simply couldn't afford to write a Navi. They couldn't write Yeshua and Melachim and Shmuel, but you have to lain the Haftorah. What did they do? So they made a new Chiddush. They made what's called a Seif Haftarah. They compiled all the different Haftorahs. They commissioned a Sefer to write out all the Haftorahs throughout the Navi. So every Shabbat they took it out, and of course they must have missed it before Shabbos. So they ended up laining the Haftorah from a written klaf, but they didn't have to go through the expense of writing all the Nevi'im. They had an all-in-one Seif Haftarah. So this week when they laid this Haftarah, they had this one and that. So they had a klaf, but it wasn't as expensive as writing all the Nevi'im. Freg di Gemara, not only you're not allowed to write that, you're not allowed to use that, and therefore it's muktzah on Shabbos. Why? It's a violation of this issa of Megillos. You're not writing the entire Malach, you're writing just one excerpt. Well, you're not writing the entire Shmuel, you're writing just one excerpt. Zog di Gemara, no, don't worry. Kivan loy efsha, and Rashi explains, because the tzibur can't afford to write Nevi'im Shleimim, Eis lasis lashem eferus ayosecha. We find that concept, the way the Meiri explains, you can't afford to do it right, so you're allowed to do it in a different way. So the Chazal waived the Issa b'makayim of poverty. So it seems that they, in the Gemara's times, used a Seif Haftarah. So Freg the Malbusha Yamtev, it's one of the Mefarshim on the Levush. What's the Levush's problem? It seems he forgot a Gemara. What's he criticizing Yidden that they don't have a Navi Shalim? The Gemara allows you to use an Haftarah. So what's his problem? Ishtamitze, the Gemara in Gittin. Zogte El Yerabba, Sifkat and Gimel, come on, do you think the Levush forgot a Gemara? Look at the Levush's Lashon. The Levush's Lashon is, how could you use Haftorahs Shekorim Bechumashim HaNitfasim? Zogtel Yerabba, of course the Levush would accept using a Seif Haftarah, which means written on a klaf, and I know there are a few shuls that I know that have this Seif Haftarah Ada Yoim Hazeh, that's fine. But the problem is that the shuls use printed chumashim, like we do. That, the Gemara never sanctioned. So here we see two things. If you have a Seif Haftarah, fine, but on a printed chumash, that's unacceptable. But this is not the final word. True, the Levush criticizes the minhag, the prevalent custom, but the Taz also quotes the Levush, and he says, I don't understand you. If you realize, and you accept, you're allowed to use a Seif Haftarah, it's a violation of the Issa, the teretz is Eis Lasois. So once you're coming on to Eis Lasois, you might as well use a Chumash. And Zok the Taz, and don't forget, now listen, this is the key words, that Tfus yesh le mamish din ksiva. Our printing is like writing. We talked about the Taz a few hundred years ago when they had what's affectionately referred to as a zetza, who took a plate and zetzed the words onto the paper. So that's mamish ksiva, ma'isi the other. So Zok the Taz, I don't understand. If you concede that there is a heta anyhow, so be a sport and accept the chumash. Because a chumash is like a written haftarah, because tfus is keksiva. So the Taz is basically sanctioning minhag Yisrael. That, at least we'll soon see, it's a little of a problem because he's talking about the ksiva, which today is not that way, but he's accepting using a printed chumashim. In other words, the printed chumash has the same yichus as an haftarah. Maybe I should say has the same lack of yichus as a seif haftarah. They're both eis lasois. So therefore, the Levush's problem is no longer an issue. Now, the Magen Avram also quotes the Levush, but takes a very interesting turn. Now, Rabbi say there are two problems with our printed Chamashim. Number one, it's not a klaf, and number two, it's not even a Navi Shalim. It's a little bit of Malachim, but not even Malachim. So we find the real problem is you don't have a klaf. But Zok Magen Avram, and he proves it from Rishonim, there was no need to lain the Haftora from a klaf. Torah needs a klaf, that's true. But there's no chiyuv to lain Navi from a klaf. You know what the problem really is? And he proves it that you don't need dioi and you don't need klaf. So the printing part doesn't bother me, says the Magen Avram. Especially because our tfus is like siva. You know what the real problem is, says the Magen Avram? How you let to print just a little bit of the Navi Shmuel and laying the Haftorah from that? I ain't kaisun megillois. You'll say eis lashem. So the Magen Avram, but today that we have printing, you hear what he's saying? We have printing, so we can afford printing. You can't be mechayev even to write out all the Nevi'im. That's too much. But to print out a Navi Shalem, so Zokta Magen Avram, I'm a chudash tiki yesod. You're allowed to, you don't need a klaf, you could use a printed Navi, but you must use a Navi Shalem. Otherwise, you're violating the Issa of Kaisin Megillois. So the Taz was very generous, says use printed, no Eis Lases. But the Magen Avram says you have to have a Navi Shalem. Don't violate the Gemara in Gittin Daf Samach. Now, obviously the Taz held, and I saw the Ksaf Seifa, the Derech Agav and Siman Nun Aleph says this, once Chazal were mekel out Eis Lasos, so nothing changes, even though times have changed. But the Magen Avram argue, listen, if you could do better, do better. Comes again the Rav, in our Siman, and the Rav is in Reish Peidal, and Kunchas Achas, if Katan Aleph, he says it again, he says it twice, and he says even a bigger kula. He says, true, the original halach of writing a Navi, als Navi, needed a klaf. But Tanakh, but Haftora, never, ever required a klaf. And he spells it out twice, on the top and the bottom. He says, true, Kriyas HaTorah needs a Sefer Torah, a klaf, but the original takana of Haftora never required a klaf. So therefore, there's no problem. He doesn't understand the Levush. I saw the Kloisenberg in Divrei Yatzav, he has a beautiful tshuva in Kuf Chav Tes. This is the end of Sif Katan Yud Gimel. He speculates what was in the time when they originally made a chiyuv of Haftorah. What was the requirement? Now this is an intriguing question, because we're not that old. Who knows what went on in the time of the second base of Mikdash? But you ever wonder when Chazal, in the times of Antiochus, when they were Mechayev Navi, there was Mechayev Haftorah, what was the chiyuv? To have a klaf, chumash, what was the chiyuv? So the Kloisenberger speculates, if that was a time of Shmad, they couldn't require too much, because it was a very difficult time. So he says, therefore, that's probably what the Rav held, that originally they never mechayev you to use a klaf, because you have to make it easy. I mean, the whole thing is a b'diavad situation. So therefore, that's what the Rav meant. They never originally required you to use a klaf. So here we see, just to summarize, that the following: the Levush, the Gra, Mishtabur of Moshe hold you need a klaf for Haftorah. The Rav Shulchan Aruch and the Taz, but the Rav is even more mekel. The Rav holds you never needed a klaf. The Taz says you needed it, but Eis Lases. No, the Rav holds there never was a chiyuv to use a klaf. And we see the Magen Avram has one concern: at least use a Navi Shalem. Gesundheit, you could use print, but Navi Shalem. Now let's apply it Lamaisa, and you will see, as we always do, the beauty of minhag Yisrael Torah. We have 3 minhagim, we'll soon see actually 4 minhagim, and everything is firmly based in Chazal HaKadoshim. First of all, I think it should be pashut. All agree a klaf is better. No one says a klaf is worse. A klaf is better, and that's taka why some say you should have it. And those that follow, especially Chassidim, follow the Rav, hold that you don't need it. But basically, we get to understand where the minhag of using a klaf comes from. Now, what's interesting is today in Tafshin Pei, there might be an additional reason, a new reason, to use a klaf. What do I mean, a new reason? Nothing changes. Because if you look both at Taz and Magen Avram stress, you could use a chumash because tefus shalanu is keksiva. You have to realize, as I told you earlier, the original printing press was a person zetzing, slamming the plate onto the paper. Like, imagine someone has a ring, we're talking about a Megillah Esther, the ring and he has his chaysim, and he sticks his ring into ink and he prints. So that's a ksiva, that's a ma'asid adam. He writes with a pen or he writes with a plate. Today's printing is no longer, besides that it's photo offset, which is no ma'asid adam. But today it's laser printing and there's no ma'asid adam. He presses a button and things start to happen. So all the paiskim say today's printing is not kiksiva. It's basically like a photo offset. It's even less than that in laser printing. So I saw Rav Sternbach and Chaylik Kesim and Pei-Beis, Yechavadas and Heichavav both say that maybe today that we can't rely on the tfus kiksiva because it's not tfus kiksiva. In other words, you'll say, my Zayda never used a klaf, I don't need a klaf. You could be right. Or you could say, your Zayda didn't use a klaf because he relied on tfus kiksiva. But today no one holds tfus kiksiva. Now, okay, you want to say that, like the Rav says, they never required a klaf, so you're fine. But again, if the basis is because tfus kiksiva, there might be more of a cheshbon today to use a real klaf. Now, Lamaisa, I wonder out loud about the minhag that people have about using a printed Tanakh. In other words, the minhag of klaf, we understand. The minhag of self-service, we understand. People have a Tanakh. Now, people call it a Koran, which of course is distasteful. Koran, what the Koran really is. The original Chumash was a print, I looked it up, Haitzoas Koirain, I guess from reading. So it became Koran, which again is inappropriate. So I'm going to use, I don't like that word, so I'm going to use terminology I think is very important. The minhag agrah is to use a klaf, okay? The minhag is, some have a minhag to use a Tanakh, a complete one book printed Tanakh. And then the third minhag is to use a chumash. A chumash, self-service, you lain just from the Haftora, like in your chumash. So I can understand the minhag of a klaf, that's the gra, lavush. The minhag of chumash is the rav, self-service. Where did the minhag of Tanakh come from? So you'll say, today I know where it comes from. It comes from the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram says, I don't mind if you have printed, but you have to have a Navi Shalom. Very good. But Navi Shalom is Navi Shalom. If today's Haftorah is Yeshaya, so take out a Yeshaya. Why do you have to have a Tanakh? And it's interesting, in Tzibur and Sif Cotton Aleph, says, Das Magen Avram, you have to have a Navi Shalom. Doesn't say Tanakh. Zok the Sharatzian, the Bri Megadim says, Tanakh, Lav Dafka. So where did a Tanakh come from? Light the Rab, anything is good. Light the Gra, you need a Klav. And the Magen Avram, who's the Machayiv, a Navi Shalom's good enough. So I thought maybe it's just practical. Because today, this Shabbos, you're going to need a Yeshaya. And next Shabbos, you're going to need a Yirmiyah. So every week you have to get a different Navi. And then comes the Pesach, and you have to have Shir Hashir. And Sukkot, you have to have Kalas. So it's practical. Practically speaking, it's easier to have one Tanakh Shalom. So now I was thinking maybe a little more practical. It's like they say, this fellow went there at Yisrael, and he's looking, he went to all the Kfarim, he couldn't find the Keva of Shmuel Beis. He can't find it, because there is no Shmuel Beis. Now, the truth is, in Allah, there's no Shmuel Beis, there's one Shmuel. Now, Rabbi say, think about this, today, most standard prints of Navi have a Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Beis. If you want to lay from Navi Shalom, let's say you have a decree of Shmuel Aleph, it doesn't help taking out a Shmuel Aleph. Because Shmuel Aleph is not a Navi Shalom. Malachim Aleph, Malachim Beis is also not a Navi Shalom. So, it's just a headache. You have to take out a Yeshaya and Shmuel Aleph and Beis you can't use. So it's practical that people use a Tanakh, it's a kolbay, and it's good for every Shabbos of the year. Someone told me a lumdisha problem, that since today, if you look at a regular Yeshaya, a small part of it is the Navi, and the bulk of it is Teresh Shebal Peh. So maybe today's Navi Shalom lost its Shem Navi because it's more Teresh Shebal Peh. Now that doesn't seem to make sense because it is the Heilig Navi, so that doesn't concern me. But I will say that to my limited knowledge, I might be wrong, for those that want to be Yaitz the Magen Avram's Chumrah, a Navi Shalem would suffice. If someone knows a different reason, please tell me, I'll be happy to hear. But again, their three minhagim seem to me to be the Klav, Chumash, self-service, and then the Chumrah of Magen Avram, a Navi Shalem. Again, a Tanakh in one volume is a practical way to do it. Now, but there's another factor to consider. I heard a Chashuv Rav that I know well. He went to when he opened up his Beis Medrash, and he couldn't afford to have commissioned different klafim, for the Anviyim. So he went to an old Svarim store, and he went to the east side, and he said, I need an old Tanakh. So the fellow, okay, and he looked, he found one, and then said, I'm going to sell it to you, but it's an antique. Okay, how much do you want? $100. Fine. And he bought it, and he went home like a Metzia Gedoyla. What was his cheshbon? He wanted to be at least Yoitza, the Magen Avram and the Taz, that Tefus Shalanu is Kiksiva. But in our times, even a few years ago, but Lamaisa, in our printing, whether it's photo offset or laser printing, it's not Kiksiva. So he found that Tanakh, this Tanakh was printed over, I think, 130 years ago. So you could assume that this one volume Tanakh was printed with the old-fashioned Ksiva, Tefus. So at least he was Yaitza, the Tfus Kiksiva. And I found Rav Sternbuch in Chelikei Pei Bei. He says in our shul we have a Tanakh 300 years ago that was printed 300 years ago. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to be Yaitza Tfus Kiksiva Taza Magen Avram. But again, Chassidim go with the Rav. The Rav says there's no need for any of this. A plain Chumash, just Haftora to Parashat Shmosh is good enough. But I will say, what's interesting is, some people say, I don't like these new things. My Zayda didn't use a klaf. I don't need a klaf. Now, could be right. Again, the Rav Shulchan Aruch is fine. But if you Zayda with Falosach on the Magen Avram and the Taz, that Tfus Kiksiva, today we don't have Tfus Kiksiva. You have to keep that in mind. But basically, the Levush and Gra insist on a klaf. Magen Avram, Navi Shalem printed, Rav Shulchan Aruch, anything is good as long as you have something to read from. The fourth minhag, which you see, I asked around, I found mamish, few shuls, very, very little, have the old-fashioned Haftarah, which means, again, it's not a strange word to us, they have a klaf with all the Haftorahs printed and must be in an order, and they mish it up before Shabbos for that appropriate Haftorah. This, again, according to Levush, is something that is perfectly acceptable. MS, there's a problem of Megillais, but we rely on Eis Laseis Lashem. So I found Taka, the Aruch HaShulchan and Sivav says that in many shuls we have it. He says, Grad and Litta, he says, we have Klafim and Taya Nevi'im, written Beklaf, but the Aruch HaShulchan, Reb Shlomo Zalman, Alicha Shleim, Yud Beis, Lamed Beis, Reb Yashiv and Ashrei Ish, Amid Kuf Tezayin, all say that if you can't afford to write the Nevi'im on Klaf, at least use a Sefer Haftarah written on Klaf. I should mention the Rav Pa'olim in Dalad Lamed Gimel says once you have to come on to Eis Lasis Lashem, so you need a hekta for that, and it's probable, according to the Gra, that insists to have a actual Navi Shalem, Haftarah would not be acceptable. But Rabbi said what we see now, there are four minhagim, besides the three that we mentioned. Now we have the Haftarah, and it's a beautiful example of Eilu ve'Eilu Divrei Elokim Chayim. Each one has a firm basis in Allah. The next part of the shir is after you have your minhag. Again, your minhag can either be a klaf, Navi Shalem, or Chumash. You're ready to go. What should I do? Tell me. What should the tzibur do for the Kriyas Haftorah? So the chayra for us, it's a Beferish Gemara, Mechaba and Rivash. Actually, Gemara, Rivash and Mechaba, I should say. And that is, one person lanes, Trei Kol Mishtamoy. You want to have Achdus, and everybody should lane together. Do that when you say Sukkot Zimra. But you can't have the whole tzibur laning the Torah. No Trei Kol Mishtamoy. There's no self-service Kriyas HaTorah. So this is the chayra, why the minhag is the Balkaira lanes from a klaf, and only he lanes. Now, I should mention that even by Kriyas HaTorah, there's a minhag somehow they lane along with the Balkaira. Why? Because this way you stay connected. If you're listening to the Haftorah, you might fall asleep, might drift off. It's the old shaila I saw, the Yisrael Shashavoidim in Hilchos Purim, Yud Beis Dalet. He says, what's better to do during Kriyas Megillah? Should you just listen or lain along? He says, that depends on the nature of a person. Some people listen better, and some people drift off when they're listening, so they're better lain along. But all agree, and the Mishnah Berurah says in Sifkat Yud Aleph, true, Mechaber says, Trei Kolay Mishtamoi, but you're allowed to lain quietly, the Haftorah, like you're allowed to lain Kriyas HaTorah quietly. In other words, don't disturb someone else. That's Trei Kolay Mishtamoi. Don't run ahead. Someone told me he's Mavasedra during laining. Now, I hope what he meant to say was, I lain word for word with the Balkaira, and that's Taka Machlaikis, but that you could do. But you can't lain at your own pace. You have to lain with the Balkaira. So if laining, you're allowed to lain along quietly and not disturb someone else, the same should apply regarding the Haftorah. In other words, basically, lain along with, but listen to the Balkaira. And now you understand the Gro's second part in Ma'aser Rav Kuf Lamed Vav. First he says you have to have a klav, and then he says a little stronger, if you have a self-service Kriyas Haftorah, it's bracha l'batala, because you have to have one person laning. You want to lain along quietly, fine, but you have to listen to the Balkaira. The Shar Ephraim, that was the Mat Ephraim Seif on Kriyas HaTorah Tes Lamed Gimel, is also very critical of the self-service Haftorah, and he says that's the minhag in our Medinas. It's ein zeh minhag v'sikin, it's a chesar and yediyah, and nochain levatal ha-minhag. The Mat Ephraim was very sensitive to minhag Yisrael, but here he didn't seem to sanction it. And the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat Yud Aleph quotes both the Gra and the Shari Ephraim. And we add, this is l'shitasam. If you hold you need a klaf, so you need a regular kriya. So what do you mean self-service? You're losing the benefit of the klaf. So this explains minhag number one, like we call it, that you have a klaf, and once you have a klaf, listen to the Balkaira. You could lain along, but not at your own pace. Mila b'mila, and make sure you hear the Balkaira. However, the Arizal, and it's interesting, the Arizal said this, and both the Magen Avram and the Gra stood with Grace Derech Eretz. They quoted the Arizal, because you can't reject an Arizal. And the Arizal writes as follows: on Shabbos, by laining, you don't have to lain. You have to listen to the Balkaira. But aval Haftorah ein at yoytzi de chayvase l'shma yoyis mi Maftir. You can't be yoytzi by listening to Balkaira. El tzarach shetikra mitoich hasefer. You, tzibur, has to lain on your own, self-service. V'tzarach shetishma bracha v'shayna v'achayna min ha-Maftir. So the diak to me is, there are two halachas that the Rizal is telling us. Number one, don't be yoytzi by listening, you have to lain on your own. And number two, make sure you hear the brachos, which we'll soon explain. But Rabbi say, this Arizal is not only accepting self-service, but requiring it. Now the question is why? Where's he coming from? So the Magen Avram and Sifkat says, the Gemara says, Trei Kolay Mishtama, you have to lain only one. That means if you're laying it self-service and you don't listen to the Balkaira, you're laning loud and you're disturbing someone else, you don't hear it. But even the Arizal meant lain along quietly in an undertone, but listen to the Balkaira. So that's not what we're looking for, the self-service minhag. And Taka, the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Prima Godim, that you have to have a tzibur listen to the Balkaira. Lain along with him, but make sure, mila b'mila, you follow the Balkaira. So this is an aborted attempt to find the source of the minhag of self-service. The Goyen Ma'aser Rav also quotes the Arizal, what the Arizal writes to lain on your own is if you don't have a klaf. If you have a klaf, do like I told you, only Balkaira. If you don't have a klaf, then you could lain benachas im akaira mila b'mila. Now it's not clear from the Goyen, what does he mean? So here we have the Heilig Chasam Sofer in a tshuva in Siman Samaches. This is one of the many Chasam Sofers that Mamish said a Yisoid that was the basis of minhag Yisrael. The Chasam Sofer says the Yisoid, I'll give a quick hakdama, There is a concept, it's a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch, siman memtes and arachayim, dvarim shebiksav yat rishai l'omer al peh. Basically, you're not allowed to say something that was written, chumash, or any type of keter shebiksav, you can't say it al peh. The question is, how do we daven say as Yoshev al peh, or good parts of davening, that's Torah, or we just had the Parashat Eichi, why are the children saying Berachos Yaakov al peh? So there's a whole tumult, but the main Torah seems to be based on Rishonim, to be moitzi someone else, then you can't lain al peh. You're allowed to say al peh, Berachos Yaakov, as Yoshev. If you want to be yoitz to someone else, then you have to lain b'toich haksav. So Zogtich Sam Seifa, true, you're allowed to lain from a chumash, alt eis laseis lashem. But it's not a seifa. It's a printed chumash. So you could be yoitzi yourself, but how you yoitzi someone else? So Zogtich Sam Seifa, Merdika Einfall. The Balkoyer is laining from a chumash. The Baki that knows what he's doing is laining on his own, because he can't be yoitzi with listening to Balkoyer. The one that can't lain, so even if you listen to the Balkoyer, he's not yoitza. Because dvarim shebiksav yater shamar apeh. So Zogtich Sam Seifa, oy bazoi, that's why the insistence of self-service. You're sparing someone else. If there's someone else knows what he's doing, he's laying on his own. If he's ain't a baki, it's letting garnish helping to listen. So therefore, stick with the minhag Yisrael, Dr. Sam Seifa, that we don't let the Baal Maftir lain, because he might not do a good job, or make a fool of himself, or embarrass himself. So therefore, the minhag Yisrael is not just to allow self-service, but it's required, because you can't be yoitza listening to the Baal Koira. Now, that's what the Chassam Sofer says with great confidence. Then he adds, as an historical fact, my Rebbe of Nosson Adler, he got 2 of these every Shabbos in Nosson Adler. He got Koyin and Maftir. And that's a whole shmooze, what was the justification, but that's what he did. And my Rebbe also lained the Haftora out loud, and only he lained. But I didn't have a chance to ask him what his minhag was. So he writes, the Chassam Sofer was bottom of Vutel to Nosson Adler, but I still think what I write is true, to explain the minhag b'chol tfutzas klila sa'elu, and no one will listen to you to change the minhag, so keep the minhag as it is. Now, Grad, he doesn't say what he did, but the Ksaf Seifa and Simon Samachalav writes, my father's minhag is, they use the chumash, and it's almost clear, mitay chumashim, they lain the Haftora. It seems to me the Ksaf Seifa's minhag was, like the minhag of Hasidim today, self-service on a chumash. So it comes out of Davar Nifla Ma'oid. It's mamish l'shitasa. Because if you have a klav, so you have a seifa, you can be moitzi the tzibah, so then don't make self-service, you're losing the mile. If you go with the minhag of using a chumash, eis lasais, you don't have the option of being yoitze by listening. So the Rav Shulchan Aruch in Sifir Aleph writes, the Arizal is tama yodu aloi, psal b'kabbalah. But now the Chassam Sofer is, he doesn't mention the word Arizal, but like the Chassam Sofer, there's a reason al pi halacha for the self-service minhag. Now, this is what the Chassam Sofer says. I'm not saying all agree, some disagree. Obviously, the Magen Avraham and the Gra don't seem to go with that. But I'll tell you something fascinating. The Minchas Yitzchak in Chayla Gimel Simon Yud Beis was asked a very sensitive question of a mitzvah boy who Leilena was a summa, and he insisted on getting him after, like every other boy, a mitzvah boy. So he used this Chassam Sofer that Lamaisa, the boy could get his aliyah, because everybody's laning on their own, and not being yoyt to them anyhow. I saw a fascinating discussion, they say Madana Yom Tov, Hey Lamed Aleph, a true story. A mitzvah boy laned beautifully, and afterwards, by the Kiddush, he confessed to his father that they opened up the klaf to the wrong place. So he said, no problem. He laid the entire Haftora Baal Peh. Gederech of mitzvah boys. So he told his father, by the way, I did a great job, in fact, I laid the Baal Peh. And his father turned white. This is a place of a klaf, what to do. Should you just stop the Kiddush, When you hold him at Kedusha Rabbah, nothing stops. Tefillah Rabbah is a halvatzar, but Kedusha Rabbah, you don't mess with. So he discusses it, the Yoytze B'di'evet, Ayin Sham. So don't let that happen. But what I wonder out loud, there are those shuls that have the printed Tanakh. So, l'chayr, according to the Chassam Sofer, you can't be Yaitza by listening to the Balkari that's laining from the printed Tanakh. So you have to lain along, because again, as great as the printed Tanakh, unless you have one of the old-fashioned, printed, written tfus ksiva type in the Tanakh, today's doesn't have a din of sefer. So like that, it comes out that the minhag of Tanakh, you have to lain along. And I think those shuls, the Balkari lanes, and everybody listens. So maybe Taka will hold that Lamaisa, since it's printed, the loikach samsoif, you give a lozach on that. I don't know if those two stem. But one thing I will say, and this to me was a metzia, the Kloisenberg in that same tshuva, in Sifkot Yudalid, he Taka says that the minhag of using a chumash is because we compare Haftora to the other Megillas, like Kehelas. So now we see what we'd started with, it was a pretty good chakira. If you hold like the Gra, then Haftorah is like Kriyas HaTorah. You need a sefer, a klaf and Kriya. It seems that the Rav and those that are making some Seifa would hold that it's more comparable to Shar Megillos. You don't need Iksav, you don't need Klaf, and therefore self-service will be sufficient. Now, this should be Pashit. If someone's minhag is always like the Gra to use a Klaf, and he ends up like the Shal, the Bache Esmi, he ends up in a minyan that they're laining from a Chumash, so you have to listen to the Chumash. You have to say your own. You can't do, what are you going to do? So, if you want to find an old Navi and lain from that yourself, fine. But basically, you can't listen to the Balkaira laning because they're using a Chumash, and like the Chsam Saifa, you don't have an eitzah of listening. So every Shabbos you listen to the Balkaira with a klaf, great. This Shabbos either find a different shul or follow the minhag hamakah. What's more pashit, let's say your minhag is self-service. You use a Chumash like all your years. One Shabbos you end up in a shul, they have a klaf. So now it's better to listen to the Balkaira. Now, of course, if you're laying from your Chumash, nothing has changed. But here you have the maila of a klaf, why not listen to the klaf? Now, you want to lane along, fine, but not too loud to disturb others. A challenging question, if someone's minhag for all his life to insist on a klaf, and this Shabbos he ends up in a shul that they're using Chumash self-service. And he gets the feeling that there might be mechaberim with Maftir. So here, should he politely refuse the Maftir? Now, if they call him up, so that's a bigger sakana to refuse an aliyah. But if he knows they might give him Maftir, should he say, I'd rather not take Maftir? So let's make a cheshbon. Even the Gra that insisted on a klaf, but he didn't hold its b'di'evet, you're not yoitza. Don't forget that. I don't think anybody says you're not yoitza b'di'evet if you don't have a klaf. The real problem is, if each lane's on their own, self-service, the Goyin says it's a bracha l'vatala. We saw the Matafraim says it's not right. So it could be, for that reason, if it can be taka self-service, and your brachos will be not connected to any kriya, it might be kedai to refuse the mafta. Taka saw the Shabbos b'Shabbati on Kuf Chav Beis. He says taka, if a person knows they might give him the mafta, they didn't call him up yet, it might be kedai to, take a different aliyah or wait for next week and get a different aliyah. Now, a common question when the shuls that do self-service, so to speak, the Baal Maftir is hurrying, and he's already starting the brachas achroina, and you're still trying to finish the Haftorah. So there is a reason which people know, but it's misleading, that you must hear the brachas on Shabbos of the Torah, because we're short Meya brachas. Now let me explain. Shabbos we find the Gemara Menachos, we don't have Meya brachas. So the eighth is to either to eat Einik Shabbos, Tanash, to make brachas. The Mechaba in our Simon Siv Gimel recommends listening to the brachas of the Haftorah and the Kriya, say Amen, and be yaitz with that Meya brachas. Now we once discussed this, how does it work? You're not making the brachas, but the Mechaba says it, Neman Aleinu Mechaba. So therefore we know you have to listen to the brachas to be yaitza Meya brachas. So kum talam, they said, listen, I'm a big nasha, and I have plenty of Einik Shabbos. I don't need the Meya brach. I have Meya brachas, so I could just continue the Haftorah and forget about the brachas. That's wrong. Besides the fact we saw the Arizal stresses, you don't have to hear the kriya from the Balkar, you have to hear the brachas. But let's make a cheshbon. If your minhag is self-service, so who's the Balkar? You. So the Kavachayim and Sifkot and Chafei, I do admit in a different context, but he says, if you're a minhag like the Arizal, then you, tzibur, has to hear the brachas. the brachos of the Maftir is going for you. So therefore, it's pashit that you have to hear the brachos. So, as the Matafrayim writes in Tesla Lamed Gimel, he mamash discusses this shal, says that's wrong to continue the Haftora. Pause, listen to the brachos, and then finish the Haftora. Now, someone asked me, but if I answer Amen, V'chu Shmai, it's a hefsek in my kriyas Haftora. So it doesn't bother me. You're fine. It's not a hefsek. It belongs there. You have to hear it. Now, the Matafrayim also, the Sharfayim also adds the Balkaira should relax and only start the brachos when the tzibur finishes laining. Otherwise, he's disturbing the peace. Now, Rav Sternbuch quotes the Qur'an. This is in Daled Kuf Nun Gimel. That's actually a chiyuv on the tzibur to hear the brachos Haftorah. Now, why do I add this? Because even if your minhag is like the Qur'an to have a klaf, but there's still a chiyuv to hear the brachos. Now, another point I want to mention, so this is a lumdish question someone asked me. He is not a big nasha, and he's yoitza may a brachos with listening to the brachos of the Haftorah. So, if so, maybe he shouldn't say Baruch Shemai on the brachos, because he's being yoitza. We know that if you want to be yoitza kiddush, you don't say Baruch Shemai. So that's not right. I saw the Elamoga in the Tafresh Chav Bei Sivkot and Gimel Nago says you're not being. It's not like a kiddush. You have to be yoitza the bracha to drink. It's a different type of being yoitza. So you could answer Baruch Shemai, but I would add, but if you do answer Baruch Shemai, make sure you don't miss the end of the bracha. Now, a few halachas I wanted to mention quickly. Someone asked me, he has to go out to the bathroom, some part of davening, and he'll miss part of davening. Which is the best eitzah? Either he goes out before the Maftir, and he'll miss the Maftir, or he'll go out before the Haftora and miss the Haftora, or wait for the Haftora and he'll go out and miss Tefillah B'tzibur. So the emes is, if you noticed, that more often than not, the Haftorah is a repeat of the end of the parsha. So the Gemara Megillah, that's a whole different shir. Chav Gimel explains, we want to show that every Navi has Torah. But basically, on most weeks, the Maftir is a repeat. So Rav Pam Zachan Baruch once told me, so if you have to miss, the best thing to miss is the Maftir. So go out right after Kaddish. So you have Maftir, Hag B'Galila, you'll end up coming back for the Haftorah. Now he told me that because in the yeshiva we have a klaf, and the klaf you can catch up, on your own. But even if you're self-service minhag, it makes sense, you have to hear the Haftorah brachos. So you have to hear the Haftorah package. So if you could slip out, not during laining, we never walk out, that's Sugya and brachos, leave after the Kaddish, and you can miss the Maftir, not miss any laining, and then you'll hear the Haftorah. Now, on a week that you have the Maftir is a new laining, let's say Rosh Chodesh or Dal Parshis, of course, that's not an option. When should the Maftir start the brachos? So that we saw Gemara. You don't start until the Goylel finishes. Now, I saw the Pischei Sha'arim in Yud Chav Gimel points out, but like those that have self-service, so even if the Goylel will miss the laining, he could do it on his own. So he says, yeah, that's only one reason. Another reason is Torah is supreme. Torah is more than Navi. By starting to busy with the Maftir of Torah, when the Torah is still out, is a slight in the cover of Torah. So that's why the minhag b'chol tvutzas Yisrael is we don't start after brachos until the Sefer Torah is put away neatly. I should mention that the El Yerab, Birkei Yosef, Machta Shekel all say a different reason, that the Goyla has to hear the brachos of the Haftorah. So he has to be focused on that. A few more lachs I have to leave for a different time, but I want to make one more point, and that is, we had once in our camp, we have a klaf, and there's a waiters minyan that davens before the camp minyan, so the waiters could, daven earlier, have a suda, and then serve the bachur. So they take our klaf, and then they finish, they give it to us. It happened once or twice that they were delayed, and we waited for the Haftorah, and they were still laining. So the question is, you have a tzibur sitting and waiting, should you wait for the klaf, or this week you'll join the minhag of many people and you'll lay in self-service? So we would be tempted to say, this is terchu de tzibur, and we saw the Gemara in Yuma. And Taka de Zecha Yehoisef in Simon Amavav says this. But I must tell you that the Paiskim say, if your minhag is to insist on a klaf, it's not an extra credit. So, it's like imagine someone says, I'm very involved in that. I decided we are abolishing Chazaras Hashatz. Teach ציבור. You can't abolish a chiv. So Taka the Sambas Chaim, Beis Chaim, Zonavel Reish Tamachei, Ali Cheshlema, Yud Beis, Lamed Aleph, Rabbi Yashiv all say that if the minhag is to have a klaf, Rabbi Yashiv Zecha Kedai to wait even 10 minutes for that, because that's a chiv and there's no Teach Tzibura. A guten Tag to you all.
Shem Yergin Shir, Torah, like a big Yasher Kercher of Smith for today's shir. The schedule, the daily shir, 1 o'clock for the next 4 weeks is on the Bima. Tomorrow is a guest speaker from Eretz Yisrael, Rav Osher Druk, Shlita Eidim of Rav Shlomo Brevdos, that's all. Rav Smith will say the sequel of today's shir, Bez Hashem in 5 minutes. So, Chananya ben Akashem, Arotzakesh Baruch L'Zakes, as Yisrael, Lefikach, Hebel and Torah Mitzvahs, Shenema, Lenach Hofes, Aman Tzidka, Yagdol Torah V'Yadeh.
Some say talking, you know that.
They changed it now to the teves Moshe, whatever. Why? Eminence is the way to because you want to be fancy. But they say why? You don't have enough Charle, Sprinze, Yacht, Wash, laining, problem.
It's a great mistake. You save like time.
I remember it was years ago. Schon gepottet am Mare?
Okay, Rabbi, so yes, Maftir and Achashir. The sikum from Rav Smith, it's not going to be from a cloth, but everyone's going to be Yitzah. Shh.
Okay, just we learned today Haftora actually goes back to the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Some say it's the Kanas Ezra, but it's surely a chiyuv. It's not just something to fill the time. The fact that we make brachos on it and treat it like a Kriyas HaTorah. The only issue is it mamish like Kriyas HaTorah? Well, we see many halachas. You need a minyan, and you don't start the Haftorah until they put away the Sefer Torah, because one person might miss. So definitely the Haftorah is a chiyuv, and every word of either we should say it or hear it. The one mahalach in Paiskim, that's the Lavush, the Gra, Mishnah, Ramosha, that a klaf is needed by Haftorah like a Kriyas HaTorah. That's why many shuls have a klaf, many, especially yeshivas. I should mention Eretz Yisrael, that many follow minhag Gra, have that minhag. The Rav and the Taz say no. Miyakara, it was never required to have a klaf. The way the Klerzberg explains, since it was a time of Shmad and they weren't able to be mechayev Yidden to write klaf, so the original takana of Haftorah was from a chumash is fine. The Magen Avraham has one difference. He says you have to have a navi shalem als a zaytige chiyuv of ein kais megillah. It's not a din in Haftorah. Today there's a problem because both Taz and Magen Avraham say our tefus is like ksiva. So today our tefus is not like ksiva. It's basically computerized or machine made. So therefore, like the Taz and Magen Avraham, there would be more of an inyan to have a klaf, but as we saw, the Rav feels there's no klaf necessary whatsoever. The Magen Avraham insists to have a navi sholem, a complete navi, not, it can be printed, but a navi. But chayre, to have a Tanakh Shalem, that seems to be just practically, so you have every Haftorah, you have all the Megillas, and one volume, you're ready for everything. If you have a klaf, you have no choice but to listen. At most, you could lain quietly along with the Al-Qaira, but it's a regular in Kriyas HaTorah. One person lains, Trei Kolam Mishtamoy, and at best, at most, lain quietly, but not more than that. You have to hear the Al-Qaira laining from the klaf. If there's a Chumash, so each says on their own. We saw the Arizal says each one has to say. The Rav Shulchan Aruch explains Al Pi Kabbalah, but the Chassam Sofer has a halacha cheshbin that you can't be yaitza listening to a Bal Kaira lain from the Chumash because of Dvarim Shebiksav Yad Shalom Al Peh. We wondered, for those that use a Tanakh or a Navi, l'char they should lain along. They should not be just listening because you can't be yaitza with our printed Tanakh or Navi Shalom. A shul that is different than your minhag, you follow the minhag hamakom. Each minhag has a base in halacha. It might be advisable to avoid taking the Maftir Haftora if they're going to lay in self-service, but once they give it to you, they call you, about you should go and rely on minhag Yisrael. A person has to hear the brachos no matter what his minhag is, and if the minhag that each person is doing their own, and they're starting the brachos, so stop what you're laining, listen, and go back to the Kriya Mitoich HaChumash. The Baal Maftir should give enough time to begin, before beginning the bracha, so the oilam could finish saying the Haftorah. A person has to go out to the Beis HaKisei during the davening. The best time is during the Maftir. Of course, not during the Maftir, before they start the Maftir, unless it's a new Kriya, like on a Dalet Parshias or Rosh Chodesh, Yom Tov, etc. We don't start the brachas until the Sefer Torah is put away. We do treat it like Kriyas HaTorah, and again, we had one shaila. If your minhag is to insist on a klaf, then you're allowed to keep the tzibur waiting. That's not tercha de tzibur, that's following halacha according to the minhag.
You have to watch them now.